Edit out this part, Arthur.
Welcome to A Century in Cinema. I'm Arthur.
And I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
And this is a podcast where we discuss a classic film from every year. This week's film is from 1946, The Best Years of Our Lives, from director William Wyler. And you can always find where to watch and stream Best Years of Our Lives in our show notes. I myself watched it on Amazon, just rented it.
As our listeners might have noticed, we have a guest with us, Dan Patterson. What qualifies you to be on this podcast, Dan?
I love movies.
That's why we're here, yeah. So you definitely passed the test. We actually have had a guest every episode, so we'll see if you make the cut. The other ones we all cut.
So you Terrence Malick these podcasts?
Okay, so you two do have a history together on another podcast, and that is...
It was a podcast that had many strong personalities involved, and one thing led to another, and it just all fell apart.
Yeah, that's pretty much fair. So yeah, I was actually on 4 episodes, and but the favorite that I did was recording a commentary track with Soy Cuba, one of my favorite movies. But going through the process of recording a commentary track with people and putting in that kind of work and effort was really rewarding. And yeah, it was something that I needed to learn how to do and something I wanted to do. So I'm happy that it was a project that nobody will ever listen to, and that
I could probably find it on archive.org.
That's not what I was asking for.
Listeners can find that on our Facebook page.
Right, exactly.
If you ever have like an off week and need to just put some type of content, you can dig it up.
Right.
Dan, what are some of your favorite films? Give me a taste of your taste.
I mean, my go-to answer for favorite film has been for years Mulholland Drive.
Cool.
My favorite area film would probably be noir, which is why I was also interested in doing the Double Indemnity episode. Like Hollywood in general, particularly like New Hollywood and pre-code.
I dig it.
Yeah.
The golden age of Hollywood, would you say?
Yes, but I particularly like the 30s. That's my favorite decade of the golden age.
Well, cool. Should we let our listeners know what's going on in 1946?
Go for it, Arthur.
Give everyone some context for the year?
Yes.
All right, now that World War II is over, you see all the ramifications unfolding. You've got the Nuremberg trials for Nazi war crimes. You've got the first United Nations meetings. You've got America testing atomic bombs at Bikini Atoll. In the U.S., there's a major railway strike and a coal strike that grind the economy to a halt for a little while. This will lead to future anti-union laws, and I'm sure it plays a part in fueling the Red Scare. Winston Churchill uses the phrase, the Iron Curtain, for the first time this year to describe the divide between the West and the Soviet Union. And the first microwave oven is invented using radar technology used in the war. But this was a big, hulking-looking thing, just something to be used in restaurants. 1946 in film. Andrew, do you have anything that you want to point out? Oh, It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life will flop horribly this year.
Right.
The Big Sleep comes out this year. Gilda comes out this year. Yeah, I don't have any specific things about form or anything.
Oh, cool. Let's talk about this film. Dan, do you want to take a stab at sort of going over the plot?
I mean, despite it being a long movie, it's really a basic plot. It's 3 World War II veterans returning home to their small town, and it's kind of just the changes that they go through, both of them and the people around them. Like, it's really simple, but it is very sweeping at almost 3 hours long.
Yes.
The 3 characters, there's Fred, Al, and Homer, right? Do we each want to take one?
Al is a dad. He comes home, he has 2 kids, and he suffers from alcoholism, which becomes apparent on the very first night he comes home, in which he gets completely blitzed with his wife and his daughter, and they start to realize that he might have an issue, and his arc is about learning to control that aspect of himself and also learning about how to reacclimate to his previous life, because unlike the other 2, pretty much everything for him is going completely back to normal, but he isn't back to normal, so he has to sort of readjust to the wavelength.
Dan, do you have a favorite between Fred and Homer?
I mean, the character I'm more emotionally involved in is with Homer.
For sure.
He was part of the Navy, and during his time, he had lost both his arms. But while he was recuperating, they taught him how to use these hooks as sort of replacement for his hands. He seems fairly well adjusted with them, but his main concern is going back home and everyone treating him differently. And not just that, but also his relationship with his... I don't think they're quite engaged yet, but someone he was planning on marrying, Wilma, played by the great Kathy O'Donnell. And yeah, of the 3, he has the least amount of screen time, but I feel every scene is just so effective with him.
And Harold Russell, the actor playing him, actually was a veteran of the war and had lost his hands.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, though, because at the time, a lot of people thought that casting was exploitative.
Yeah, I could see an argument for that. But if he's on board with it, I think that it offers dignity and a way to showcase that what a person like that's going through. I don't know. I didn't feel that way when I watched it at all.
Because it was originally going to be a character that was completely fictional and was suffering from acute PTSD and having like spasms and fits.
Yeah, I guess the PTSD kind of got shifted to Fred, the middle-aged man coming back from the war.
I think the character's supposed to be in his late 20s, but I think Dana Andrews might have been in the 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was a soda jerk before, like, just 5 years earlier. So it sort of implies that he was a teenager.
It does. He just has the jawline of a middle-aged man.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, he was born in 1909. So, yeah, he was almost 40.
I can rephrase that then. He's a 20-something or 30-something, maybe even 40-something.
Exactly.
Hey, it's classic Hollywood, 20 through like 60s old relative.
But he's coming back from the war. He was a bomber pilot. He is trying to readjust to society by trying to get a better job and live out a more normal life with his wife, who he married just before the war. Unfortunately, things aren't going well for him. He is suffering from PTSD. Job prospects just aren't there. He actually has to take up his old position as a soda jerk, someone just working behind the counter. And his wife is actively cheating on him and doesn't want to be in a relationship with someone who isn't earning more money.
It's funny you say that. Because of the code, they couldn't explicitly say she was cheating. So they insinuate it, but they never like explicitly say.
It's pretty much there, though.
I love that her name is Virginia Mayo.
Anyways, Fred falls in love with Al's daughter, Peggy, actually. And they begin a romance that will last through the film.
Yeah, it has its peaks and its valleys in that relationship.
There's marriages, there's happy endings, everyone's great. Great. Where should we go from here, guys?
General thoughts, baby.
Oh, by the way, is this both of your first time watching it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. This is my second time.
I really liked the characters. I think that's the film's greatest strength. I don't know. Just when the film ended, I was like, I want to spend more time with these people. I could see them making for a good limited series or something like that. Just because we already had spent so much time with them.
Would you classify it as what Quentin Tarantino would call a hangout movie? Like, while watching it, you're hanging out with these characters?
They're going through something a little bit more than just hanging out. There's some drama there.
Yeah, as much as I loved the movie, but as much as I did, if I was hanging out with these guys, I'd be like, this isn't my vibe. I'd go find something else to do. Unless it was Dana Andrews and he was falling in love with me. Then it would all be different.
That'd be okay.
Yeah, it would be fine. I could handle his PTSD nightmares.
No, I just loved the writing. I loved each character had their quirks and their faults that you want to see them work through. And, you want the best for them, especially Homer. I mean, he's going through the worst that there is, I think, out of the three.
Yes.
And then, of course, you're just cringing when Al's drinking at the work events and making a fool of himself. And, of course, you want Fred to have the best and you want him to get the girl in the end and all of that fun stuff. Yeah, who is the writer on this? I thought it was excellent.
I know this. It was written by Robert E. Sherwood.
There we go.
Yeah, I loved it too. I thought I loved it, actually. I won't lie. I thought all of the really long takes through all of the different rooms and buildings were really well done. I thought the film was very expressive in the way it was lit and designed. I thought all of the production design actually was it felt very lived in, and it felt really polished at the same time. I know that these were like very realistic size sets that were made to make it feel like an actual house you would be living in or an actual office you would be working in, and I think that paid off really well.
Versus like the Hollywood size set where they're making room for cameras and the crew and everything.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really well-made film. I thought it was very investing. The length did not get to me at all in any way.
No, me neither.
I was very invested. And I thought all of the performances across the board, the entire cast, I thought just everyone really brought their A game, especially Myrna Loy and Kathy O'Donnell. Both of them really had me in my emotions. And as you both have already said, Homer's plot for me also really made me emotional. And I loved it.
Yeah, obviously, I love the film. I wouldn't have asked to be on the show if I didn't. I know the concept of a universally beloved movie really doesn't exist, but I feel like this is one of those films that kind of comes the closest to achieving that. You know what I mean? Like, it's the type of movie you can bring the whole family to and everyone would enjoy it. But not just that, but you can have someone like Andre Bazin write about Greg Toland's use of mise-en-scène.
It's a film that can be appreciated on an emotional level and on a sentimental level, but also can be analyzed thoroughly and studied on a professional level.
Mm-hmm. Also, I have to say, like, it's rare for a first-time watch for a movie to make me cry during the beginning. But when they pull up to Homer's house and he's nervous about going and they tell him, no, go on, and everyone sees him, like, every time.
And I did cry multiple times throughout the film, but that was the first time. And yeah, just everyone welcoming him home.
I also love when Al comes home and he's hushing his children so that he can surprise his wife. That was the one that got to me. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a heavy 3 hours. Well, great. Those are our general thoughts. We all liked it.
Yes.
I was hoping, honestly, that Andrew, you would just have some real beef with this film and we'd get into like a real heated argument and we'd have another like really dramatic podcast. But we gotta pick one for the next decade. We gotta comb through and pick one that we will just hate. It's been too positive. It's been too positive for too long. What other particular scenes stood out to you that you really liked?
When Al got drunk at the mic.
Yeah.
It reminded me of this great scene in Giant where James Dean is drunk and talking into a mic to an empty room. I know that George Stevens has seen this film, so it sort of, I don't know, it made it feel like that was an expansion upon this sequence because they're both scenes that require a surprisingly raw and realistic performance from a film that is filled with Hollywood performances, which isn't a criticism. It's just the way films were and kind of the way they still are. There seems to be more of a desire for realism from actors now than there was at this time.
Well, this was like pre-Brando, like when method acting kind of took over.
Exactly.
There were a lot of aspects of The Best Years of Our Lives that reminded me of sort of what Altman does in his ensemble pieces.
Yes.
Where there's multiple character actions going on in the frame.
Yes, and even the really long takes going through the buildings and the rooms and following different characters feels very much like something that's going to be developed much further by, of course, Altman and Paul Thomas Anderson. I definitely see that. And the fact that it doesn't really have much of a plot, it really is just a slice of these three different lives that we're following simultaneously in this mosaic edit. It feels very much like an Altman film. Dan, have you seen Rome Open City?
I have not.
Okay. Well, my next point I just wanted to bring up, one of the things we brought up in that was how gritty and realistic that film looked, and how it was so clearly affected by being made right at the end of the occupation. And I sort of just wanted to circle back on that because this film was made so quickly after the war was over as well, and the aesthetics of that film versus the aesthetics of this film, and how these different cultures come together to reflect on war.
I mean, it's startling, right? Just the difference between how an Italian filmmaker views the end of the war as this very, like, come to Jesus moment. This really hard, gritty, violent look at how humanity is confronting evil. That's a very hard film to watch, and it ends with some glimmer of hope for sure, but it's a really tough film. This, The Best Years of Our Lives, is like it's a film promoting the best years of our lives. This is wide open, happy springtime that we're kind of heading into after the war. Yeah, we're going to have to work through a lot of things, but at the same time, this is a film that is sort of uplifting throughout the entire process. At least that's how I felt.
Are they, though? I was going to say, because the only time that line is ever muttered is when Virginia Mayo is complaining that because she was waiting for Dana Andrews, she wasted the best years of our lives.
Incredible title drop. I did not see it coming. And it was in the middle of someone referring to it in a negative light.
Yeah, the contrast between Rome Open City and this film, I feel like it goes to show just how America's post-war optimism versus a country like Italy, this needing to rebuild basically from the ground up and salvage what they could. It stands in stark contrast, and that's really interesting. America, the homeland, is so far from where the war was fought that people returning home don't get it, right? The veterans are kind of faced with a population of people who don't really understand what they've gone through, versus Rome Open City. The entire population went through the war.
Right. That was what made the contrast so stark for me, was that Rome Open City, there really aren't characters. It's a very external conflict. The main character is the city being occupied, whereas this film was entirely internal struggles. The external world, outside of, obviously there are some bumps and there's conflicts along the way, but the majority of the conflict in this film is people's internal struggles with acclimating to regular life after wartime. I thought that was actually a great double feature because they both represented such different conflicts from a war and sort of showed the breadth of distress that can come from a war with two very different films that I thought both were fantastic.
I was going to say, because it's not completely positive, because they talk a few times about the possible threat of nuclear warfare. Like, everyone at the time thought that World War II was going to be the last war like that the next, armed conflict was going to lead to the end of the world.
Yeah, Al's teenage son mentions that. And then they just kind of brush it under the rug. I mean, Al doesn't want to face that right now, right?
Well, I don't think anyone at the time, but I think a lot of academics or just...
Yeah, his teachers are telling him about it, but Al as a character is like, can we please just go get a drink?
Mm-hmm.
The one sentiment in the film that I did find hard to wrap my head around, but also we are decades past this coming out, was the man at the soda shop who tells Homer that we were fighting on the wrong side of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think that that kind of sentiment was in any way popular or being spread around back then?
I do think that sentiment was there. We just obviously don't hear about it because that's not how history went.
Yeah, definitely on the wrong side of history, that kind of opinion. I got I saw that as just someone who thought that communism was worse than Nazism, so we should have been kind of let the Soviets and the Nazis fight it out, and they would have defeated. That's how I looked at it.
And I do know that earlier, kind of in the 1930s, there were people who were pro-Nazi Germany in America who were saying, Hitler's doing great things for the German economy, revitalizing this and that. All of those arguments that are completely out of date now that we know how history went.
And it wasn't as big as in the 50s, but there was still like anti-communist resentment in the 30s.
But yeah, I liked that part of the film.
Oh, yeah.
It just jumps over the counter and punches him in the face. I didn't see that coming.
I just don't understand why you would talk like that to people who had just gotten back.
I mean, yeah, he's lost his hands. Jeez.
Yeah, he's
read
got
the
two
room.
hooks. Yeah, I mean, that guy just sort of, it made it very easy for us to think he had it coming.
I did enjoy that the guy used arguments that frustrate me today from certain people. Just use common sense. These are just the facts. I'm just saying the facts as they are.
Or read this. I'm not going to explain any further. People haven't changed.
It still does bring in, just the seed of thinking a little more thoroughly about the war and not blindly following news tells you and what the government was telling you, raise a little bit of awareness, bring in a discussion point, which I thought was
like if this was a
interesting.
straight propaganda film, that scene would not have been in it at all.
Right.
So this was directed by William Wyler.
Correct.
What was his involvement in the war? Was he a soldier? Was he a correspondent? I know he was involved in the war somehow.
Let me pull up. He served as a major in the Air Force. And he actually has movies made during that time. Documentaries is what they're called, but most likely propaganda, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen them. I thought what made this film interesting to think of from someone who'd been in the war's perspective, not only did he have his own acclamation to take into account, but also in general, they all lived in a culture where World War I wasn't that far in the past. And so everyone had witnessed what those soldiers went through when they came home from the war. And it felt like a reflection on both of those. It doesn't feel like it's specifically a World War II movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see that. It's about a veteran's experience. And
yes. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
This was also based on a book, Glory for Me, 1945.
Which we all read.
I was just going to say that was from a war correspondent, McKinley Cantor. I'm probably pronouncing that really, really correctly.
Sorry, McKinley.
And then it was adapted into a screenplay by Robert E. Sherwood. So all I'm pointing out is that there are a lot of people actually involved in the war who are involved in this production, and that definitely lends itself to its quality. You can feel that. Yes,
it has a very authentic feel.
Despite the fact that it is still, at the end of the day, sort of a melodrama staged. I mean, it has a lot of the... It's not like a documentary by any means, but it's got its heart in the right place.
Yes.
I think the closest it comes to that is when Dana Andrews is walking through where all like the jets are about to be scrapped. I think that's the closest it gets to being sort of a neo-realist documentary.
I love seeing that huge graveyard of planes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else we want to say on William Wyler? You say his reputation at the time and his experience.
Oh, mainly that this is the second of his 3 Best Picture wins. The third of which we are going to be watching at the end of our 50s discussion.
Okay.
What was the laugh for?
No, just I didn't expect him to be on Ben-Hur.
You didn't expect him to direct that, but he did.
No. Okay.
I think I put this talking point here because I want to talk about the movies of his I love Roman Holiday, Audrey Hepburn's big debut. It's such a fun movie. And I love The Children's Hour, which was later in her career and is one of the best roles she ever got to play in a movie, honestly. And then Funny Girl, of course, one of the greatest musicals ever made. And then I mentioned in the Robin Hood episode, Olivia de Havilland's incredible performance in The Heiress. That's also a William Wyler film. And I mentioned in the 1939 episode, Wuthering Heights being one of the great films of that year, and that's directed by William Wyler as well. And in 1938, the film I talked about with Bette Davis that was a knockoff of Gone with the Wind because she didn't get cast as Scarlett O'Hara, Jezebel. He directed that as well. So he's sort of we've mentioned his films a lot throughout the podcast already. So it's nice to be able to actually focus on one.
I gotta say, it is overwhelming, the amount of just crazy things I don't know about Hollywood in this time. It feels like every single episode there's a new, like, oh yeah, this person who was like the grandmaster of all these films. And I just can't keep up. I'm sorry. Okay, so William Wyler. Gotta check out William Wyler.
More context about Wyler in this film. I think him and John Ford were considered like the two quintessential directors of the 30s in America, but they both had a period in like the early 40s where their style was being considered like dated or old-fashioned, and critics were looking at films by like Orson Welles and John Huston and Preston Sturges as like the future of cinema. And both directed films in 1946 that kind of revived their careers. Like Wyler made the film we're talking about, and John Ford made My Darling Clementine.
I love that.
Yeah.
They both had little resurgences this year.
I mean, pretty much every artist who's worked for like 3 decades is going to have like slips and surges.
That's how it goes.
Yep.
He won Best Director for this film at the Academy Awards. This film swept the Academy Awards, right? I just saw a bunch of wins. Like, I can't even keep track of them.
It won 7 Oscars and 1 honorary one. And we forgot to mention Harold Russell. He's the only actor to win 2 Oscars for the same performance.
And he's not even a professional actor.
Wait, he won the honorary award?
Yes, supposedly they didn't think he was going to win Best Supporting Actor, but since he was a veteran and people were inspired by his performance, they figured, oh, let's just give him this honorary Oscar as a means of being nice to him. But then he did win Best Supporting Actor. I mean, he is great in it, but I'm not going to say like his performance is seamless. You like, even if you didn't know he wasn't a professional actor, you can kind of tell, which is why I think they use him the perfect amount in the movie. Like, if they would have had him more in the film, it would have become more clear.
Yes. The scenes that call for him to bring in the emotions, really, Wilma is sort of the emotional anchor of those scenes, and he plays off of her really well, but she's clearly the professional actor between the two.
I see here on Wikipedia that in 1992, he sold his Best Supporting Actor statue at auction for $60,500 to pay for his wife's medical bills, which makes me want to vomit.
We don't treat veterans right in this country.
That is messed up.
Am I getting up? Am I getting on a soapbox? No, not this time. Yeah, that's so messed up.
All right, so on that note, we can move on.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, for a film that was so huge, right behind Gone with the Wind is the second highest grossing film of this time period, right?
Correct.
Up to now, up to this time period. It's kind of surprising that we don't hear as much about it. This was the first time I'd seen it, the first time Andrew's seen it, only the second time you've seen it, Dan. Why do you think this film just hasn't stood up to the test of time, like something like Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz?
Well, Roger Ebert actually pointed this out, that it is strange that a movie that was so big and received so many Oscars, like, had a bare bones DVD release. I don't know if it's gotten a Blu-ray upgrade since, but yeah, I feel like most of the home release has just been this bare bones DVD with no special features.
And all those films were also re-released throughout history. And I don't know if this film ever got any sort of like campaign for re-releasing it and finding new audiences.
Yeah. I don't know. It could be that it's not as influential as, say, like Citizen Kane. And it's not as, like, quote-unquote fun as, say, like Casablanca. And it's not like a holiday tradition like It's a Wonderful Life. And we just have to also acknowledge that people aren't really into black and white movies anymore.
That was what I was thinking was, I mean, it will never be difficult for me to sit down and watch an almost 3-hour black and white film because I am conditioned for it at this point in my life. But your average moviegoer, if you say, hey, I love this movie, you should watch it, they find out it's from the 40s, it's black and white, and it's almost 3 hours long. I think it's a tough sell.
It's true. I mean, I was going to say that the situation that they're going through seems so tied to its time and place, World War II, the post-war, people returning home. But I think, Andrew, what you said about this kind of applying to just the experience of veterans could apply to almost any war. So I kind of stand corrected on that.
It does feel like a wholesome family movie. I truly think that I think that this movie could live on in, like, Christian homes. I'm not kidding. Because, even while I was watching it, I was thinking, man, if I was watching this with my parents, my mom would have started crying at the beginning and wouldn't stop until the end. Because that's how she watches movies, and I love her for that. And my dad would be so impressed by it. And, yeah, I think that could... I do think that it could have a chance at being re-seen as a classic later down the line.
Yeah, your comment about it being popular in Christian homes, I think, is very, very true.
Which is funny because the only relation to Christianity is the wedding scene.
Yeah, but the whole thing has that wholesome American vibe to it.
I mean, as I was watching this, I was just thinking how basically this is setting up the values that I have gone on to associate with the 40s and 50s, right? Like the nuclear family, the man, woman, and the kids running around in the front lawn. And, there's an antagonist in this film who is a working woman who just wants to work. She's seen as kind of this harpy that is up to no good.
And I'm not saying this is a negative thing because I'm very pro sex worker, but is she supposed to be a prostitute?
It's hinted at.
I thought that's what she was saying was that, I used to make all this money because I was able to be a prostitute. Now that he's back, I can't work. Because why else wouldn't she be able to work now that he's back?
Oh, I took that as her just expecting him to come back and, be the breadwinner in the home. But I think with the Hays Code and everything, I think that's exactly what is being implied.
They only say she works at a nightclub, so you could look at that as maybe like, she might have been a singer or a cocktail waitress, but more than likely she was probably just kind of a call girl who would like entertain like the wealthy guests or something.
And yeah, the film makes it pretty clear that it's very difficult to find her at these nightclubs that she's working at.
Should we talk about a review from the time period? See what others were saying?
Bosley Crowther has yet again returned.
Friend.
Yes.
Bosley Crowther.
He keeps showing up. Do you know anything? I know that you know a lot about critics and critic history. Dan, do you have any insight on Bosley Crowther?
Well, I know there was a time where he was like the film critic, and then somewhere in the mid-'60s, he hated Bonnie and Clyde, and he was obsessed with it. And you had like hip critics like Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert who loved Bonnie and Clyde. And at that point, people were kind of looking at him as sort of like old and out of touch. And they kind of let him go because of that.
I can see that. Yeah, we happen to have used a lot of his reviews because the New York Times, where he wrote, just keeps really good archives. So we can see all of the reviews that they have even from this far back.
He did not understand Dance Girl Dance, though.
Yes.
That's all for that.
I'm kind of on the side of the hippies who were swearing off Bosley Crowther because of what he said about Dance Girl Dance.
Exactly.
Yeah, but he's over here calling it, comparing it to just like he thinks this is a masterpiece.
I can honestly empathize with that.
Yeah, I can empathize with it too, insofar as I think if you were watching it at the time, again, just coming off of everything that had happened, this feels so relevant to everything going on. It is a humanizing film. It's a very touching story.
But you wouldn't call it a masterpiece.
I don't think I would. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, I'm just not as enthusiastic about it as he is.
Did you cry during it?
Yeah, I cried during it.
So why isn't it a masterpiece?
Because I cried during Click, man.
Oh my gosh, masterpiece. Yeah, he really enjoys it. And I think he captures the sentiment of how people were probably feeling about this movie really well, with it seeming to be so sweeping and grand, but also feeling so intimate and personal. I think that if I watched this film 3 more times, I would start calling it a masterpiece, truly.
Do you want me to read a review from Billy Wilder?
Yes.
This is the only thing I've ever seen where the picture started and 3 minutes later I was dissolved in tears, and I cried for 2 hours plus after that. That was the opening sequence in The Best Years of Our Lives. The moment that the guy without his arms was standing there with the back to the camera and the parents came out, I was gone. And I'm not a pushover. Believe me, I laugh at Hamlet.
I love that. Where did he write that?
I don't know. I found it on a piece because I wanted to pull up what Andre Bazin wrote about it, because he was a big fan of this film and Wyler. And to kind of just summarize the piece, Wyler didn't choose to do anything other than realize on film the essence of a theatrical mise-en-scène that would not use the lights and the set to ornament the actor and the text. Nevertheless, there is probably not a single shot in Jezebel, The Little Foxes, or The Best Years of Our Lives that is not pure cinema.
I love Billy Wilder's take on it. Bosley Crowther, I think this is a really great review. Honestly, we've been able to sort of see him evolve, because his earlier reviews were maybe 1 or 2 sentences and then a plot description, and then that was it. But this is a full review.
He's doing better.
Yeah, I think this is really well written. I think this is great.
We're going to follow Bosley Crowther's career throughout the rest of the century, I'm sure.
Subtly.
Up until his Bonnie and Clyde review where they give him the boot.
But yeah, I mean, who cares if I don't totally agree with this? I'm just some dude.
Yeah, you didn't get it.
I didn't get it, really, at the end of the day. I didn't get it.
Andrew, should we bring up what our favorite girl, Pauline Kael, thought about Best Years of Our Lives?
Let's hear it. Do you know who Pauline Kael is, Arthur? Do you have an opinion on her?
I know she's a critic. I know she is later on in the century. I haven't read anything from Pauline Kael that I know of.
Well, Dan is a big fan, and I do not like her at all. But I find humor in her takes sometimes.
So let's hear her take on The Best Years of Our Lives.
Let's hear it, Dan.
She basically thought, like, yeah, it was really big. It won all these Oscars, but it's not exactly a great film.
And why? We can't read the whole thing, though, if it's a Pauline Kael review.
Oh, no, this was part of 5001 Nights of the Movies, so it's a very brief review, but
okay.
I don't know. She basically thought it was, like, too long, and a lot of it is, like, kind of drags on and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that.
She does have a very short attention span, if her reviews are to be believed. I think. Maybe that's too hot of a take.
Another critic I could bring up, James Agee. I read his review, and he really liked it. He had some reservations on it just because he had reservations on, like, 40s Hollywood of that time, and it's very much a product of that. But no, he thought there was a lot of admirable qualities about it. And he even said, why am I blanking out? Greg Toland's cinematography, it might be the best since Greed.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I said this at the beginning. I thought visually the film was a complete delight. Every single shot I thought was just so well constructed, but in a way that if you were just watching it as a passive viewer, didn't intrude in any way. It all felt very natural and the story was able to flow through it. But if you were looking at it for the technique, I mean, lighting throughout all of it was so gorgeous and I think I already used the word expressive, but I'll say it again. I mean, when he's being faced with the opportunity to take his bank job back, even when he's still thinking about it, there's the Latisse lighting of the bars across his face. So it looks like he's already feeling sort of imprisoned by this life. That kind of imagery is really tough to pull off without it making look way too on the nose and way too obvious. And I think the film does a great job at keeping things really subtle and not hammering anything over your head visually while still being able to be completely masterful with its images. Yeah. Do we have any other things we want to talk about?
Any final thoughts? I think I would just say that this film's outlook on, I don't know, like I said, it just feels like a product of its time with the 50s mentality, the nuclear family, and the idea that marriage and just settling down is the end all be all. That's the goal. That's what everyone should aspire to. It's not like the film is saying that like explicitly, but that's the heart of this film, I think, and that can feel a little out of date.
Yeah, I can see that. It definitely does. The ending seems to say, oh, it's a happy ending because they all have a woman in their lives. And,
Yeah, all the women in this film are just there to kind of comfort the men, and it makes sense because they're all coming back from war.
Even Virginia Mayo?
No, but she's the bad guy.
She is literally the only thing even close to a villain besides war itself.
I can see about the whole settling down theme, but I kind of got a whole love conquers all feeling from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the ending between Dana Andrews and Teresa Wright, it's kind of open-ended because you don't know where his future is going to lead, but it's basically saying as long as they have each other, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And she works at a hospital, so she can keep her job while they're together.
And he has a job tearing apart airplanes to build houses, which is another... Again, this film is just leading into all the things I imagine in the 50s, all the suburbs and everything now. All those planes become the beautiful suburbs we know and love.
Yeah, post-war sentiment. Well, I really liked this film, and I'm really grateful that you were able to join us, Dan, and give us some context of the film and talk about the critics. And yeah, this is a great episode, I thought.
Thank you, Dan, for joining us. That was great.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was a great film. I really, really enjoyed it. And when I saw the length, 3 hours, I was like, that's okay. I'll split it in two. But honestly, I was gripped and I watched it all the way through in one go. I really liked it. Even though of the three of us, I'm probably the most lukewarm on it. It's still a great film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My closing thoughts. If I knew someone who had no idea what America in the 1940s was like, and I had to show them one film, I would show them this one. I mean, you can pretty much break up the 40s between World War II and the post-war, where everyone's trying to adjust, leading into the 50s, which can be broken down into the suburbs and the fear of nuclear warfare. And the film captures it all.
I like that. So, let's think about what we're going to watch next week, Andrew.
Well, the next 2 weeks, this is a double feature situation. We're doing Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's two Technicolor Marvels. Next week is Black Narcissus, and the week after is The Red Shoes.
Are you allowed to double dip directors?
We are allowed to do whatever we want.
Where can people find these two lovely films?
As always, you can check our show notes to find where to stream Black Narcissus and The Red Shoes, and we look forward to discussing them next week.
So we are going to discuss... We're going to do 2 episodes. We're just going to split them into...
We look forward to discussing Black Narcissus next week. and then the red shoes the week after.
Okay, now it makes sense. Even I was confused. Thank you.
Tell us if you were confused or not in the comments on the Facebook post.
I just want to give a shout out to all our Patreon members who keep the show running. Thank you all. You too can become a patron and get access to bonus episodes linked down in the show notes. You're listening on YouTube now, so like and subscribe and comment down below. Tell us if you've seen the film. What did you think of it? Did we miss anything? Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next one.